Hidden dragon thought. Something something.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Crowell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Claire Waite Brown about podcasting 2.0 in practice. Hey Claire, thanks for speaking with me today.
You're very welcome. Just one thing,
Go on.
Waite Brown, Claire Waite Brown.
What did I say? Did I say White?
To be
I've got
fair,
I've got it down as Waite as well.
Yeah. No, James Cridland keeps trying to call me White Brown as well. I know, it's Waite Brown.
Go through all the colours.
Yeah.
So what was your introduction to podcast?
Yeah, so I started, it's a little bit of a cliche in that it was a lockdown baby. I had no intention of starting a podcast, but previously, but I had this, what I thought was a good content idea, and 120 odd episodes later, I still believe it's a good content idea. So, and I started that. It was meant to be a way of keeping something going that I wasn't able to do in lockdown. So I used to do these drama and singing classes in lockdown. I used to host them, not in lockdown, before that. Had to stop them, thought, I can tell stories of people who have found their creativity later in life, which was the experience I was having through these classes of meeting people. I can do that in podcast form. It can promote open stage arts. And once I started podcasting and enjoying it, it just took over, and going out and meeting podcasty people, and it just really took over. I absolutely love everything about it. So that is how I came to start podcasting, from a different place to where I am now with it. It's far more important in my life than I ever envisaged when I started it.
It's done the exact same thing to all of us. I think all of us just did it to sort of like just give us something to do at that point, or most of us who started at that point. It was just something that was needed in a way to get that almost out there talking to people, and because you were stuck and all that.
Yeah.
Even for people like me that were working through it, there was like a negative side where I was out there in the world, but there's nobody out there.
Yeah.
Or very few people. There were very few people out there, so there was no interaction outside, even when I was working. And then come home to just me and my other half, and there was nothing there either. And it was just needed some. We all needed something at that point.
Yeah, it is. When I actually started, it was in the summer of 2020, when here in the UK anyway, we were allowed to go out and meet one person at a distance. So I did start recording in real life and very local to myself in Oxford. And then we got locked down properly again. And contradictorily, that actually widened my horizons. And I'm now speaking to people all over the world because of being forced to do stuff remotely. And so that whole period of time of being, as you're saying, you're going out to work, I was at home, but speaking to so many other people all over the world that I wouldn't have spoken to had I been going about my normal business and we hadn't had this COVID nonsense. So, yeah, it really widened my horizons, weirdly.
I'm going to go on a tangent now, and that's for when the lockdown happened. Do you think that that's sped up the technology and the companies getting the technology built up, because suddenly there was an influx for these businesses?
Yeah,
because podcasters that had never done it before were using these services, so they were like, "Oh, we're going to have to up our game now, because now it's a big thing to be podcasting." And people doing these chats over these software and different things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm sure they did. And the other thing about it is that everybody got more comfortable doing it anyway. Yeah. So there are situations now where you could go and speak to a person in real life, but we do actually choose to, for example, I record on Riverside. I just do everything on Riverside, and they haven't had to, but they certainly, and I know the other ones do as well, bring in new things really, really quickly now. And then when the AI thing hit in the way it did, with now you can edit with your transcript and things like that and take out the ums and ahs, which I don't think is quite right just yet, certainly to my experience. But yeah, they're putting all of those things in, definitely. Yeah, it had to speed it up, and everybody was using it as well and continued to do so. So it wasn't as if, okay, you can all go back to work now. Everybody went back into an office and didn't need to use this stuff anymore. We all still use it.
Yeah, we all got addicted to this chatting, especially when you chat to people in other countries and other cultures. I mean, I think most people are the same with that, where you'll chat to someone in another culture, and there's something interesting about that, because it's almost like traveling abroad, but from home.
Yeah. And there are people I wouldn't have the opportunity to speak to had I not created this niche little subject that I want to talk to you about. I wouldn't necessarily travel to Japan and go into somebody's house and meet the person.
That's one of my most interesting chats, actually, is when I had somebody, and there were two people who make a show together, Xander and Stone. And one of them is in Arizona and the other one was in Japan. The two hosts of the shows were in Arizona and Japan. So you got people, one person is so many hours ahead, like 11 hours ahead in Japan, and the other one was 6 hours behind Central Time in America. And that was one of the most strange differences in time zone ever.
Yeah. Time zone still confuses me. I managed through it, but it still confuses me.
Yeah. So you've already got Creativity Found. Creativity Found is great. I love that. And I love the people that you chat with on there. There's such a warmth there, and it's a comfortability if you're having that listening to you chatting with these people.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Thank you.
You've done Creativity Found, and we're both guilty of this. We've got one podcast, and then think, you know what, we'll do another podcast, and then another one. So why another podcast? And then why did you choose the subject of podcasting 2.0?
Yeah, so much like the first one, I never intended to do this. And it wasn't a point of, I want to do another podcast either. So what was happening was, as part of this experience of, we've just mentioned, getting really involved in podcasting. So I'm listening to podcasts about podcasting. And one of the first ones I was listening to with Buzzcast, because I host Creativity Found with Buzzsprout. And I was hearing people being mentioned on the show. And Albin or Kevin was saying, we've had so-so sats from so-and-so, and so-and-so says, and I was like, I want to be mentioned on that show. What the blazes are these sats? What is this such and such an app? So that's why I started researching, and that's how I first started to understand the features that come under the banner of Podcasting 2.0. Now, on the other side of my podcast nerdiness is my podcast sociability, and I'm out and about meeting people, independent podcasters mostly like myself, and when I mention this, they either draw a blank or have said, oh yeah, I have heard something about that, I think I should know about it, but I haven't really got the time. And it was that, so there was that kind of mismatch, that kind of disparity, that kind of gap, and I'm thinking, there's so many ways that this is easy to use and it can help you. And then, so I had the misfortune for poor old Oscar Merry, who was behind me on a staircase at a Pod News Live event. I'd had a long conversation with him about this whole process. And I spoke to Sam Sethi about that event. And I was just kind of feeling that there was this kind of gap in that this is very techie. There's loads and loads of stuff. It's really difficult to understand. From an independent podcaster's point of view, this is really useful stuff to understand. And I wanted to somehow be in that gap in the middle. And I was having a chat with Sam Sethi about this, and he said, what do you want to do? Do you want to write a book? Now, I'm an editor of books. I do not want to write a book. Thank you very much. So I was like, no. And then I was like, it's a podcast, isn't it? It's obvious. We're talking about podcasting. do a podcast that explains these things about podcasting. So that's where the idea came from. And as is often the way with me, once I get an idea, hyperdrive, I'm off, let's make this work, let's make this happen. So I started to build the concept for the show and how I wanted it to work, and started making it.
And what a lovely concept as well, because what you've done, I mean, this touches on the next point, really. What you've done is you've structured it in such a way where it's like a course in a way. So you've got different stages for each episode. So you're chatting with these experts who know what they're talking about and getting their knowledge, essentially. And I've got to say, how lovely was James Cridland? I mean, he's just so warm. We chat that chat that you had with him was great.
Yeah.
And then you've arranged it and structured it so that you know when things are going to come up later. And it's great because every now and again you'll get future Claire here, just to let you know, we will go into this bit later. And it's all that. It's almost like you've got your own matrix going on.
I have. I mean, so I mentioned that I edit books, and this is how I approached this series. So it is a limited number of episodes, and it's a combination of two things. So I work on illustrated non-fiction books. So they are books that tell you how to do something, how to do pottery, how to take fashion photographs, things like that. So for a long, long time, I've known this process of how to best organize things so that you start at the beginning and you build your layers up. So I even planned the episodes. I had a flat plan, which is how you'd normally plan out your chapters and your page plan for a book. So I even used that to plan this. And also a couple of the books I've worked on before have followed this format in that they are a course. They're meant to accompany your university course. So and this is what I do with the various episodes of this show. I'll pick a chapter. So, for example, it hasn't come up yet, but in the future, we're going to be doing transcripts. So that's my feature. So what I'll do is I'll get the expert to give like the lecture almost. Here's what it is. Here's why it's good. And that is a really, really important thing. It's not technical. It's not about how it gets into your RSS feed. I don't care how clever people do that. What I want to communicate is why this is good for a listener and a podcaster. So that's what I talk to the experts about. And we talk to it at that level. Why is this good? What is this thing? Why is it good? Then I do what I call the homework episode. So if you've had your lecture, then you get sent off, you've got to do an assignment. This is your assignment. And this is me actually telling you how to, for example, find the transcript on the various podcast apps. I also talk about how to put your transcripts in using some of the hosting companies. So I'll explain different ways of doing that. And then there's one other element that comes up every now and then. And this is like when you're at university or college, you're meant to read around your subject. You're meant to do further reading. And that's what the extra credit episodes are. Like, you don't have to know this to continue the course, but this is interesting and this might be useful. So that's why I know about Future Claire as well. Future Claire is in books, you might have cross references. It might say such and such a word, see page, la la la. So that's why I put in those Future Claires. Now, there is one other slightly annoying thing about this project that I hadn't foreseen until now. And that's where post-production Claire now needs to come in, because sometimes people change things and they change their user interface, or they might change their terminology. So I've already recorded these episodes and I've put them up and I've put the chapters in. And then all of a sudden what I'm saying in that chapter is incorrect. So I've started to need to put in every now and then a bit of dynamic content that says, okay, this is wrong. This is what it is now. So it's constantly evolving. And yes, I do like to think that I'm kind of living in the future right now, or it's a bit odd that way, but it is all around. It is doable for ordinary people. That sounds condescending, but what I mean is when something starts to get a bit confusing in a present episode, don't worry, guys, we're going to explain this in a future episode, and it is easy to understand. you don't need to worry about it now. And that's because also I've planned the episodes to follow in a very particular order. And I do say on every episode, every now and then, you have listened in the correct order. You have listened to the first episodes first, because they build on each other, and that's all been planned that way.
Yeah. It is like a book where you can't expect to understand the ending of a book unless you've read all the way from the beginning all the way through.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's also interesting about your show is that there's certain myths that are getting looked at as well, such as Mr. Cridland was spot on about the how the word podcasting came about, and he's sort of like, yeah, it could be seen, that could be it, or it could also be this, and that's sort of like that sort of area. And I like the fact that he was open like that. And then with the chaptering, that was an eye-opener, because for all this time we've been told, oh, you don't want people to skip sections. Yeah. You want them to listen to the entire episode, whereas that's not necessarily so.
Yeah.
And somebody was saying that you're right. Some shows, if they do a preamble in the chat for so long before they get to the main topic of the subject for the show, some people don't like that and they're pulled away from it. But doing the chaptering with it, it's right that you could then think, oh, this here, it says to me that if I go to 25 minutes, I'm not going to have to go through all that to get to the meat and potatoes of what I want out of the episode.
Yeah, you're not losing a listener. You're keeping a listener. And another analogy I've made to this is, for example, say you do a sports podcast, and I love your sports podcast, and you talk about all the sports, but I only want to hear about women's rugby, water polo, and road cycling. I don't want to hear about the others. I'm not going to listen to the whole show to get to the bits I want to listen to. But if I can very easily click on the chapter for water polo, I'll listen to that chapter, then I'll go to the next one. There you are. You've kept a listener rather than losing a listener. And I've got some other scenarios around that as well. But yeah, chapters, it's not a negative thing that means you're only listening to one bit. It's a positive thing that you're only listening to one bit, because you might not listen to anything at all if you didn't have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you then, you've structured the show in the order that you've got the episodes in, how do you then decide which guest fits that specific subject that you're honing in on for that next episode?
Yeah, it was interesting. Some of them actually just came to me, people that I know, and I'm thinking, you're a good fit, I think, for this one. So I've chosen a mix of, first of all, male and female, which sounds a bit old-fashioned to have to say, but I do hear a lot of male voices. So I wanted to really make sure I chose female voices in amongst this as well. I hear a lot of male voices talking about this topic, but the majority of independent podcasters I speak to are female. I also wanted a mix of people who are known in the industry, but also other independent creators. So I chose Sarah Ferris to talk about monetization because she is an independent creator. David and Leela, who I'd met at Podfest, because David and I met having spoken about Podcasting 2.0 in a queue for a bar randomly. And so then I also wanted to have a mix of a representation from hosting companies and apps. So I didn't want too many of one thing. So I've got Sam from True Fans and Oscar from Fountain. I've got Jordan from Buzzsprout and Danny Brown from Captivate. And so some of them I knew, some of them I've heard on other shows and thought, I would like you to talk about this subject. Some of the people I have heard on other shows and thought, I'd like you to talk, what would you like to talk about? And that's how I made it all kind of work together. So I'm hoping it's a good mix of external voices.
I think that for sure, definitely. So we were already talking before we officially started about this. So what do you use for recording and then the editing?
Yeah, I love this. And this is another thing that really surprised me. So I use Riverside for recording. I record video as well as audio. And I've done this for a while with the wonderful idea that at some point I'll use that video for highlights. Have I? No, because I just don't have the time. I have actually. I've got my daughter doing a bit of research for me and doing some timestamps, so I will do that in the future. But I do feel the quality that comes for me from Riverside is really, really good. I edit in GarageBand. I have done the whole time. I absolutely love it. I think for me, I like to see the waveform, hear everything. Yeah, I really like a phonic, so I now put everything. So I do edits first in GarageBand so that it gets tighter. Then I run it through Auphonic because I don't want to, not so much as podcasting 2.0 because they're podcasty people I'm talking to, but certainly with Creativity Found, I don't want people to feel they can't come on because they haven't got certain equipment. So sometimes there might be some background noise. Auphonic can deal with that and it still sounds super. Yeah, so I've loved exploring all of these kind of technologies that surround the whole process of making the show. Yeah.
You spend a long time doing the edit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I like it. And I think from being an editor of books, I'm quite pernickety. I probably take out more than I need to. I have absolutely no qualms with taking stuff out from my guests because I've always done that as a book editor. So I do spend a lot of time on it. We were speaking earlier about Riverside and I know Descript does it as well, and your actual text and the automatic filler words. And I've wanted that to work and I've played with it, but I've found it hasn't worked. It ends up making me more work. So I just take the raw audio and I do all the editing in GarageBand. Yeah, it's a funny job editing, Martin, because I really enjoy doing it, but for some reason, it doesn't feel like a real job. Okay. So I have this weird mindset of, I should be doing something else. I don't know where that comes from, but I do enjoy the editing. And when I do actually make myself sit down and do it, I really enjoy it. I'm making this beautiful finished article. It's like work of art. Yeah. It's a work of art I make.
But the editing, not so much with this, but with one of the other shows I do or co-host, and I do an edit of it. I do the chart-based show called Toppermost of the Poppermost, where we go through the charts from 60 years ago in the UK and the US. So I do an edit on that, just to pull away the curtain here. So I do an edit on that takes me a while. And then I hand it to one of my other co-hosts, Ed Chen, and then he does an even harsher edit on it.
But that's what we do in publishing, book publishing, is you'll have your copy editor that edits, and then you'll give it to somebody else for proofreading, which is a good thing to do because they are a different eye on it, and in our case a different ear may hear things that you don't hear. Obviously I don't do that with my podcast. I do both of the jobs, so I do 2 edits, but the final edit is usually really quick. But I understand that process.
But our show is really heavily edited because I do 2 edits and then I send it over to Ed and then he does one as well, so it gets
editing.
And he throws in all like the sound clips, and mind you, I sometimes do some of that as well. But we've got an archive that we're going to set up on the cloud at some point, and we're trying to get all these clips and interview actual stars from the 60s and 70s ourselves to use to throw into episodes, so that when we get to their songs, we can suddenly throw in us talking to them about this. That's the idea. We're going to try and hopefully have that because, I mean, not to sound awful, but we really need to archive this precious stuff now while they're still with us.
Yeah, I knew that was what you were going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and that's something else that other people have said about podcasting is the preservation of voices.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I know when I was talking with the two guys outside of the chat that I recorded with them who did a Beach Boys podcast, and I'm losing apples and oranges. It's the Beatles versus the Beach Boys that they're doing. So they're picking an album by the Beach Boys and putting it up against the album that was by the Beatles at the same time.
Oh, wow.
But one of them was saying that what they love about it is that it's father and son. So there's this almost like thing there that they will always be together chatting on that show, which is really nice. A good thought, that.
Yeah.
So show artwork.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I love my show artwork. So what I wanted to do, again, inspired by the design work on the books that I work on, was to have a different colorway for each 2.0 feature. So chapters has a different colorway from transcripts. Transcripts has a different colorway from person. So with Creativity Found, I actually have a membership with Creativity Found as well. And a member of that membership is a designer. Nice. And so I went to James from the Pink Octopus and I said, this is my idea, is to have these 6 colorways. I want them to kind of blend into each other. I gave him an idea of some colors I've seen before. It starts with orange. I'm afraid everything I do is orange. Creativity Found is orange. I got married in orange. Everything is orange. But it goes through then these other colors and then that can repeat. So I think there's 6 of those. So the introductory chapter episode and the conclusion episode are the same color. So then it starts again. And I wanted to specifically make sure it wasn't techie looking. It was just a nice color that is appealing to everybody. So he made the templates for me for all of that. And bearing in mind, the headings have to change. For example, I've even got an extra credit homework, which I wasn't expecting. So he's made me these templates and then I can jiggle things around, put the photos in when I've got expert guests. And then those colorways will just continue and grow. And that will just continue if there are to be future series, which I believe there will, because there's so many more features that I want to talk about. But I wanted it to look really juicy and inviting and colourful and bright and happy.
It's almost workbooky in a sense, coursework, when you get these workbooks that you get in a course. Yeah. It's almost like that, where it's colourful and then you've got it bold, where you know exactly which unit you're on, essentially, which element that you're that you're working on for that course, that section.
Yeah, exactly that. So like your module, so to speak, is chapters. And then within chapters, you've got your guest episode, your homework episode, your extra credit episode. So they're all grouped together. They're all the same color. They've all got chapters written in bold. And then the other bits, dependent on which episode it is. Yeah, it's like chapter openers in a book. Yeah.
Yep. And then you've got the sound and the music that you have, sort of like you have a bed sometimes that's underneath that you talking. Yeah. Especially in the bits where you cut in with future Claire. Yeah. There's a little bit of something in the background underneath that.
So it's not just me like coming out of nowhere. Yeah, I wanted both bits of music. I wanted to be, again, non-techie, just cheerful, just light. And then the second bit of music is the future Claire music, so that you know that something's coming before I get in there and say, hey, it's me, future Claire. Yeah. I love both bits of music.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you hear this thing and you think, oh, something's happening here. And that future Claire music comes in and then, hey, it's future Claire here. And then you stop talking and then the music sort of like drifts off and you go back to the chat.
Yeah. Good. That was my intention.
It's good production.
Thank you.
So then you've got that, and then post-production. What do I mean by post-production? What you do... Well, we've already explained that, where you'll put the music cues in and you'll put in these little edit-ins and things. Anyway, so that's post-production, is it?
I think so. The lovely thing, so if you think of the post-production, so I host this show on Captivate because I want to have a good experience of different hosting companies. And what I need to do is, of course, use the 2.0 features within the teaching that I'm doing in the podcast. So all very meta. So I put the episode up, I have to put in the chapters. Not I have to, that's a good thing to do. But especially when it starts coming to homework, I put in chapters and I also take screenshots, and we learn in the chapters module about attaching links and photos to 2.0 chapters. So I am using photos in the chapters that show you how to do the thing I'm telling you to do. And I've made these screenshots with little arrows and things. So that is perhaps a bit more post-production work than you might do for a normal show, because I'm writing your teaching notes, your crib notes, so to speak. So that takes a bit of work, but it shows that it can be done. The transcript, obviously, I do pay a lot of attention to the transcript to make sure it's absolutely right. I don't always do that with Creativity Found. They're quite long episodes, but with this one, I'm like, you've got to get the transcript right, Claire. So you do have a bit more work after editing and uploading with this particular show. And then I do mention quite a lot that technologies change. What I'm saying to you now is what is the case now. That may not be the case if you're listening in July or August or whatever. So where I can, if things change and I can put some dynamic content in to explain that change for people listening in the future, then I will. So it's kind of an ongoing process, and I need to keep my eyes and ears open on the apps and the hosting companies to be aware of any updates.
I'm glad that you answered that way, because now I'm going to steal one of your things now and say, this is past Marv coming to say, that is exactly what you meant by that on your show notes, putting post-production. I did mean the whole chaptering of it, and then the pictures that you put on as well, the different pictures for each chapter as well. So you've got, I mean, that's really good. But in essence, that's also teaching people and showing them, so like when you do the chapter episode, for instance, this is how you do the chaptering, but this is how it comes out at the end. This is how you can make it look to the person watching.
And this is how you could use it in your show. If you think this is relevant, this is an example of how it can be used. So it's all very secular and meta. Yeah.
So when I was listening to it on my in the van at work to your show, and we've got that screen in the middle of the van, for instance, all of a sudden the artwork changes for each chapter and the screen gets covered with this new picture of yours, which is great. Yeah. I should really take a picture of the screen one of these days.
Yeah, because I was looking on my phone, looking at how it looked on the various apps, because I've seen how it looks when I put it up on Captivate, but then when the episode's out, looking at, is it too small? Is a little bit small, but it depends what you're looking at it on, and you can zoom into it. But yeah, I was quite impressed. I was like, this looks really good, actually. I've done a good job here.
Yeah, I need to have a look now and see if I can find.
And I've put a few cheeky gags in there every now and then.
Yes, I've noticed that as well. So I'm trying. I need to point those out. I should take more notes on your show. Yeah, I haven't got one to show you. When it happens next time, I'll send you a picture of what it looks like on the screen at work.
On the big screen,
On the van, on the big screen.
Yeah, thank you.
What are we on to now? Listener questions. Hey. Should we start with a serious one, or should we start with some of the other ones that have come? So, actually, Chris Rollison, and this has got nothing at all to do with podcasting 2.0. I can't believe he said this. He said, when I was a kid, he said, we always asked each other what each other's favourite dinosaur was.
Yeah. Isn't that cute? I mean, I'm definitely a long-tailed, long-necked kind of dinosaur girl. So, but also the names I find are quite amusing, like Diplodocus. And I remember my children had Brachiosaurus, which looks very much like a Diplodocus, I believe. Yeah. And I remember my children playing with their dinosaurs. But I also remember when I was little playing with dinosaurs, and my ginger cat eating my Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's a tiny little
Nice.
Tyrannosaurus Rex, but there's my cat biting its head, and we'll have a photo of that, because then that looks like this massive cat is eating this Tyrannosaurus Rex. So while I'm not a massive fan of dinosaurs, I can see why they would be of interest to little people, and I certainly know my children both loved playing with them. I like pterodactyl, but mainly for the word, because of the pater.
Yes.
Pterodactyl. Because I'm a grammar editing text nerd, but I do like a pterodactyl.
So with the cat, then essentially you were doing your own Ray Harryhausen film.
Exactly, yeah, and it was exactly at that time it was like in the 70s. Yeah, it was my own future film. Yeah.
Yep. Eric Paul Johnson from Face the Music, an Electric Light Orchestra song by song podcast. I've got to say the title properly. He said, have you got any suggestions for other ways to promote a show other than social media?
I mean, I do, and I enjoy doing this, a lot of networking and going to events and talking to real people. Even when you think everybody knows your show because you're always posting about it. And then when I was at Podfest, I'll say, this is my show, this is what it's about. Wow, that sounds brilliant. So there were so many people out there who don't know. And even, I have to say, to be brutally honest, even when you get a guest, so Creativity Found is all guests, even when you get a guest who has a massive social media following, that doesn't necessarily come down. That doesn't make any difference to your listener numbers. So perseverance, I mean, for Creativity Found, I've seen a real increase in download numbers recently, and I have no idea why. Perhaps only because they're finding it and there's a lovely back catalogue and it's all filler, no killer. No, other way around, all killer, no filler. Yeah, so no, not right. It's difficult, I have to say. I think maybe that's why I find editing as a mindset, like I should be doing something else, because you spend so much time trying to market your show and let people know that your show's out there. But speaking to people and being on other shows, obviously.
Creativity Found, just to touch on that, that's almost like if you were saying before we started that there's such a wealth of different types of podcast out there. You could mix it up in a sense. So if you've got something really, really serious, and then you've got another really, really serious subject-based podcast, having something like Creativity Found put in the middle of that is almost like you've had such a serious, big topic of one thing, and then there's the calm and comfortable and like light, fun element that's in Creativity Found, where, quite frankly, you always sound like you're smiling in the episode as well, in episodes of Creativity Found.
That's from my acting training. I always smile.
But it's nice to have that mix up, to be able to sort of like go from, oh, that's a bit serious, oh, that's to liven your back up. And I think that's one of the interesting things about podcasting, is that you can actually do that if you want. You could mix it up and listen to these different things.
Well, yeah, and I think from what you're saying about Creativity Found, I think it's a safe place. So this is about consistency, in that with that show, you're going to get happy ending, because that's the premise of the whole show. They find something creative, everything's lovely. What comes before is why they weren't doing something creative, what was going on in their lives. There can be some sad, depressing, upsetting stories that lead up to that, but you always know you're going to get the happy ending. So it's a kind of a safe space, as you say. It's a safe space to go because of the consistency and the arc of the show. You're always going to feel happy at the end of it. I guess that's kind of like sticking to your guns, understanding your content, not necessarily taking on every other person's advice, but being confident in what you want to do with your show.
Right. We can't really touch the Roy from Stellar Future Radio. His question, we've already said, you can't really pick 5 favourite Beatles songs.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roy.
Yeah, I can't. I can give you... The weird thing is, and I'll tell you why it's weird, is that I'm not a massive music fan.
Yeah.
And the reason that's weird is because I'm a dancer. I have a
Okay.
degree in dance. I teach a dance fitness class. I'm a member of a parents' street dance crew. I do like music, but I'm not one of these people who really follow it. If I hear something I like, and with the Beatles, anything I hear of the Beatles, I like. It always makes me happy. But I will say one that does stand out is, and I had to look up the proper name, which I think is, I saw her standing there, because I will always say it as she was just 17. And I really like that one. And I think that's quite a different one. And I think I like it because of the whoo, which I can never do. But so that I can give you one.
None of us can do that. I don't think. Tried it. And finally, listeners' questions. My co-host on Top of Most of the Poppermost, Ed Cheney, said to ask you about do you know anything about planned extensions to, he's getting all technical now, sorry. He says, do you know anything about planned extensions to XML RSS and how that helps the individual?
No. No, all I know is that the tags and the features for Podcasting 2.0 that are being proposed, they are proposed, people talk about them, and then somebody says, yeah, let's put it in, and they enable the clever people to put it into the RSS feed. So if the hosting company wants to include it, they can. The listening apps, if they want to support it, they can. That is the extent of the tech I know with regards to, and that's very specifically the Podcasting 2.0 features that are in existence and being proposed going forward.
It might be a future module, maybe.
Maybe.
With an expert explaining it, because we can't.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing about this show is I'm not the expert. I'm just the enthusiastic listener. And then I learn about it as we go along with the show.
Absolutely.
So future, I'm not so sure about, but I do know plenty of people who will want to tell me about it in the future.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to people who are thinking of making their own podcast for the first time? But also, do you know what? Before we get to that, what things do you think people need to look out for with Podcasting 2.0, and are the important things to reach for now that they can do? What are the really big things that they need to look at with the updates?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing you need to do, other than listen to my show, but in fact, this one of the Dave Jackson episode, it's really early on in the course for a reason, is called 101 and 2.0 Podcast Basics. And that explains where this is all coming from. But it also explains, and this is a really good thing for you to think about before you choose your hosting company, because I tell you in the homework how to find out which hosting companies support which features already. And that's going to make it so much easier for you. If you go to a hosting company that already does these things, you're straight in there. Lots of hosting companies don't support yet. And this is part of a process that we're going through to try and tell individual people that this is good. And then they can tell their hosting companies, look, this is what I want to do. So another thing that often is brought to the forefront when people think of Podcasting 2.0 is Bitcoin. They think of sats, they think of boosts, they think of streaming, and they go, oh, I don't know what that all means. There are more useful features. I do talk about those, and I think they're very useful because I'm actually earning some sats now, which is lovely. But there are some more understandable, useful features such as chapters. I think chapters is super duper. Transcripts obviously is so good for everybody. But in my transcripts episode, I explain, and James Cridland comes on to talk about the Apple thing as well, what a 2.0 transcript is and how to make that work. I think Podroll is a really lovely one. It's really easy for podcasters to recommend shows that they recommend, that they like. So we're talking here not about an algorithm, not about an app saying you should be listening to this. We're talking about, oh, hey, Claire, who does Creativity Found, she recommends this show. I might like that show because I like Claire. So Podroll is a really good one. And then the person tag is another really useful one to kind of connect the people that you're listening to. So you're listening to guests, you want to find out more about that guest, or you want to find out other shows that they're on. So my advice is go back to podcast 101 and 2.0 podcast basics, those episodes, then have a look at the 2 websites that I talk about that show you which hosting companies support which, and then take it from there. Generally, advice for starting, absolutely do start it. One of the things I will also say is to not get too bogged down by other people's advice. Like, people will say, you have to put out weekly, you have to do this, it has to be this particular length. What's the optimum length? Personally, I'm on a content thing. If your content is good, if you believe in your content, that's what you believe in, then that's what you go with, because podcasts are about people wanting to hear about particular subjects. So that's the important thing to start with. I've got lots of other things. I'm very happy to speak with people about experiences I've had along the way. But it's a wonderful thing to do, but don't expect it to be an easy hobby. And I say hobby, don't go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to monetize in a year's time. It's much harder than you think. And it takes a lot of work to get your show found, to do the actual production. That's not to say don't do it. I do it and I love it, but just don't have false expectations of what you're going to get from it.
Yep.
That sounded a bit negative. I didn't mean to be negative.
No.
Realistic.
I mean, it's different to radio. And I've always said this, it's different to radio podcasting because it's, as the Americans call it, niche, or we call it niche. It's a niche. It gets those little bits that a lot of the time, some of the most interesting ones are the bits where it's not captured by normal radio, these sort of shows. And then, so you'll put your episodes out, and even if you're listened to by, 50 people across the world, you're providing something for those 50 people. If they're staying and listening to you constantly, that is something that's important to those people. You've made a difference to their everyday life, because your show is part of their thing now. It's their thing that they get into. And that's important. That person, you've touched that person with your show, and there's nothing like it when you get feedback from those people as well. And they'll go, I liked this show. And then they go into detail and tell you why. And there's nothing like it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that doesn't have to be chosen by a person, whoever chooses what should go on the radio. It doesn't have to have mass appeal, and it can give lots of other people who have something to say, a story to tell, a place to do it, and a place for. So with Creativity Found, I just love that all people can hear other people saying, I went through this and this is how it worked out for me. I think if that can give someone some inspiration or just some reassurance, then that's priceless.
Yeah. And so, okay, then. So we've already done podcast advice as well. So what shows do you like to listen to yourself?
It's funny when we were talking about mixing up the style of show that you listen to. So I do enjoy listening to my podcasts about podcasting. So Pod News, Buzzcast, in and around podcasting. And then I intersperse those with a bit of cults, for example. I do like to hear about cults, mainly because I really like, again, the fact that these are ordinary people who are not stupid. And it's really interesting the way that, and I've learned a lot about human behavior through listening to, for example, I listened to Was I in a Cult, where they interview people, and you're really understanding that this is a very normal person who has been influenced in these ways. So I like that. The other one I like is This Is Actually Happening. Again, it's an interesting story. And that one I really like because even though I know that Whit Missildine is directing questions at them, you never hear the host, you just hear their story. And it starts from when they're young, which may have nothing to do with the actual point of the story. And then recently, I've started getting a bit techie. So I found a show called Open Source, spelt SAUC. Maybe I found that through you, actually. And I started to listen to that. And what I like about that is it's like podcasting 2.0 in practice. It kind of explains the applications of these tech developments. So it's like applied maths or something. It's not just here's how it works, it's here's how it could be used. And the two women talk about how it might be used, what they think about things in the future. So I've always found tech fascinating without needing to understand exactly how it works, but how it might be, how it's interesting. Yeah. So those are some of the things I'm listening to at the moment.
Cool. I mean, that there with the open source, I like when they take a subject that could be, I mean, much like yourself, when you get these experts on podcasting 2.0, you get these experts on with these subjects that can be really complicated, but they simplify in essence for the everyman to be able to understand. And they'll be like, look, if you look at it like this with basic blah, 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 this, that, and the other, and all the tech babble, as they call it in Star Trek, it's just going to go over people's heads, or a lot of people's. But to break it down and then look at it and how it can work in a simple way and just say, this is this, but the way you can do it is this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, that's how that works. Okay, I understand it now.
I've heard the word quantum for a million years, but they really made me understand what it actually means.
Okay, great. So where can people find you and get hold of you if they want to, Claire?
Yeah, so obviously the podcast is Podcasting 2.0 in practice, and I have on Instagram and at Podcasting 2.0 in practice feed. Other than that, everything else comes under Creativity Found. So there's creativityfound.co.uk, Creativity Found podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Creativity Found on YouTube. So yeah, look for Creativity Found and I'm there.
Right. And before we go to the sign off, this is just to let people know, I don't know if anybody knows, so I've got a plan for this season, as I call it, of Pods Like Us. And the idea is that when it comes towards the end of this season, because I'm breaking it up this year where we've got podcasters and then people talking about experts. So I've already had JP from Tropical Podcasting and these people. So the plan is that at the end of the season, there'll be a group chat with all these different experts where we're going to get them all together, and then all the podcasters will contact for advice, and then in a group chat between all of us, we will answer these people's questions at the end of this season of Pods Like Us.
Wow.
Or try.
How very interactive.
That's the idea. I'm trying to get more interactive, you see.
Brilliant.
It's good to have a nice initial idea. That's another one of my, that'd be a suggestion I give to people. It's good to have an initial idea that you like, but there's no problem with changing it slightly as you go along to sort of like build the idea essentially, or the format.
Yeah, there's a big theme in Creativity Found actually, is that when you start something, don't think you have to stick with it either at all or in the same form. Yeah, things can change and that's fine.
Okay. Thanks for speaking with me today, Claire. This was great.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You can find Pods Like Us on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, Facebook, and contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. There's also a Patreon if you want to look for Pods Like Us, and for £1 a month you get extra bonus episodes and extra bits and pieces as well. But anyway, everybody, thank you for listening to us, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.